r slash ProRevenge. My dad had worked at the same company for almost 30 years before he was abruptly fired for compete bullshit. He was coordinating an upcoming meeting of people who had to fly in from around the country. One important participant resigned unexpectedly, so Dad cancelled the meeting via email and explained why. Apparently that counted as improperly communicating privileged information, and he was fired the next day. All this happened a week after Dad's boss retired and was replaced by a new guy who wanted to cut costs. What a coincidence. This was about 10 years ago, near the height of the recession. Dad was in his 50s, hadn't interviewed for a job since the early 1980s. He wasn't sure he'd ever find another job. My mom went back to work at a school to pay the bills, while Dad scraped together what he could doing some shitty online consulting gigs for basically minimum wage. They managed to keep their heads above water, but only barely. Dad was out of work for a year and a half. He finally landed a job at a new company 3 states away, coincidentally about an hour away from where my wife and I lived and were expecting Dad's first grandchild. Mom and Dad moved to live about 20 minutes away from us. They had paid off the mortgage on their house, so they decided to keep it and rent it out, planning to retire there in a few years. New company treated Dad very well. Better salary than he'd made at old company, good benefits, and respect from his coworkers and superiors. A year later, Mom and Dad were able to buy a second, smaller house near their grandkids. Dad mentioned a few things about his time at old company to his new bosses. Nothing confidential or anything, more like overall strengths and weaknesses. Of course, the story of how he got fired came out as well. It turns out that when you work at a company for over 25 years you learn a thing or two about how it works, and cutting costs by firing experienced employees can make your company vulnerable. New companies started to get very interested. They saw an important business opportunity, and also a chance to get revenge on behalf of a valued employee. A couple years later, new company bought old company. They were both big companies, and mergers of this size take time, but when the dust settled it was clear there were redundancies, divisions and products that both companies had that new company only needed one of. They kept as many of old company's people as they could, and very few lost their jobs. Except, of course, for the people responsible for firing Dad. New company put Dad in charge of the building he used to work in at old company and let him choose his employees from both old and new companies. Dad had to move back to the old state, so new company helped sell his house in the new state and gave him a moving stipend of several $1,000s. But Mom and Dad were just moving back into their own house. They sold their new house that they'd made payments and improvements on for 5 years for a nice profit. With that money plus the moving stipend, they paid off debts, saved for retirement, and took me, my siblings, our spouses, and the grandkids on a cruise. Edit. Since people are asking, I never heard exactly what transpired when the guy who fired Dad got downsized. But, since it's Christmas, I'm actually able to just ask him. Dad wouldn't say. Exit interviews are supposed to stay private. I told him about this post, with all the names left out, and that people wanted to know. He just grinned and said, that would be improperly communicating privileged information. Setting, in the military somewhere east of Germany. 6 MOS into tour, everyone is starting to hate each other because you eat, sleep, drink, work, and play together. We really disliked some of the groups we deployed with. There was fraternization, bad-mouthing, selective rule application, and more. 98% of the misery can be tracked back to a certain person we will call Lucky the Leprechaun. George and I are in the same section and work together. There had been some grumbling as to our work ethic because after several months of working 9 to 10-hour days our systems had redundancies, so our tickets were spread out. George found the reviews for the Haribo sugar-free gummy bears and we were laughing ourselves hoarse when inspiration strikes. I decided to buy some, and leave a bowl of them in the mayor's cell office, like the super that everyone hates. Unfortunately, no dice, these gummy bears have been discontinued for like 5 years. A couple days go by, and I wonder if any other sugar-free products had the same effect. So after some Google sleuthing, I found this Albanese company. They apparently used the same recipe as Haribo, judging from their online reviews. The downside is they come in 5-pound bags or bigger. I order them. I had no real concrete plan for deployment at the time I ordered them, I just did it. It was perfect, military mail being what it is. I expected 2 or 3 weeks to pass before I get them. I was leaving soon for a couple weeks. The gummies were supposed to be there when I got back. I don't know if they airdropped these onto my base, but I got those in record time the day I was leaving. I opened the package thinking it was something else, and I see the bears. 2 things occur to me: I have to get rid of these, and there is a warning label on them. Thinking the jig is up, I place them in the office of the people grumbling about our work ethic and leave. SpongeBob voice 4 days later. I am explaining the inner working of some piece of military equipment when I get the text, "Lucky the leprechaun has been peeing out of his ass for 4 days." It takes a solid 10 seconds of looking at the text before realization hits. I got the full story when I returned from my time away. Apparently someone in the grumbly office, ignoring the warning label, opened the gummy bears and eats a couple, which prompted a feeding frenzy, and over the course of 3 days almost 4 pounds of gummy bears is consumed. It took 11 people 3 days to correlate frequent violent bathroom breaks with the chewy little morsels they were gorging on. There is only 9 bathroom stalls in our immediate vicinity. My auntie is a great woman, a little crazy, but great. About 15 years ago, my cousin got her first job in a warehouse. She loved it. My cousin, Danny, isn't like the rest of my family. We're gobshites, but she's really quiet and sensitive. She was fine in her job for 2 weeks, and then a woman who was at least 20 years older than her started bullying her. She started giving Danny a huge chunk of her workload and telling her to get it done because bosses say so and shit-talking her. Danny came home every day crying because she made her life hell, but still stuck it out because we're fighters. My auntie hated this, but she did love getting her own back. The next week Danny goes to work and has to meet the new workers in orientation. My auntie is stood at the front of them smiling at her and waving. She'd applied for a job at the same place to look after her until the woman left. Her plan started the next day. After having worked in warehouses before, she got the hang of it and was very efficient. She also made a point to get her work finished quickly so she could take on others' work, mainly the bitches. After doing this for a week and talking to the managers in the smoking area about the work, and my auntie says that bitch has just been standing around with no work and that others have noticed too and aren't happy. The managers must have kept an eye on her as she was in a meeting a few days later. This pissed her off and she was venting to a lot of people. My auntie used this as an opportunity to go to the manager and say that bitch had been abusive and threatening about the warning to her. The bitch was called into another meeting and fired a week before her holiday month-long cruise. One of the managers, my auntie befriended and has been a very close family friend since. She's known as Auntie Debbie in my family now. She still knows bitch and said that she was horrible to work with and she had many warning for hostile work environment type things. Bitch is now divorced, overweight, and bitter, who keeps asking Auntie Debbie to make her birthday cakes for family members for 5 pounds. So I posted this in petty revenge, but it was apparently too extreme to be there. What my friend does goes way above and beyond the original offense, so it's pro-revenge, done in a really petty way. Follows all rules. So now to the story. I live in the desert part of the US, and during a few months in the summer it is consistently over 110 degrees, 43.3 for my Europe brothers. I was borrowing my friend's car for a quick drive, cause mine was at the shop. He asked me to park it in the shade, but I could not find a shady spot, so I couldn't. So when he went to use his car, it was burning hot inside. He went to me and asked why I did not park it in the shade, and I told him I could not find any. He told me I would regret it, and I thought he was joking. He then offered to pick up my car from the shop. I said yes because I thought he was going to just park it in the sun for a one-time revenge. So I drive a Prius and it uses automatic keys that open it when you go near it. This will be important later. He parks my car in the sun like I expected and gives back my keys. I expect this to be the end, but no. The next day I went to work and parked in my normal spot in the shade. One of the only shady spots there. After that I walked into work and proceeded as normal. Later I went to find my car during lunch, only to see it 3 spots over in the sun. I thought that it was weird, because I remember parking in my normal spot, but maybe I'm just tired and someone was already there in the spot, and I'm having a memory lapse. My car being in the sun, was burning hot. This continues to happen for like 10 more days, until I finally convince myself I'm not crazy. I start thinking, who the fuck is moving my car? No one has a key but me. Then I remember my friend and what he said. He had to be the one doing this. I talk to him and he smiles. Apparently when he went to pick up my car, he got a new automatic key made for $300, and has been moving my car 2 or 3 spots over every day into the sun. Well, let's just say it did not stop after that, but instead he did it more. From my apartment, to work, he made it his life's duty that summer to make my driving miserable. Also, if you're reading this name redacted, you know who you are. Fuck you, dickhead. Additional info, for anyone who thinks it's fake cause he could not get the key copied that easily. I had my title and registration in the car. I don't do that anymore because people have made me aware about how dumb that is. I would never take it out cause I would lose it. He also had my driver's license so the shop would let him pick up the car. I asked him and he said the people who made the key just asked for the registration and title and never even asked for the driver license even though he had it. Also, he has stopped and given me back the key because it's winter now. This story is a few months old. He said that one summer was enough pain for my sin. Back in my first year of college, I used to live in a residence on campus with 3 other dudes. 2 of them were cool, shout out to Dog and Al, but the third, named David, had a nasty habit of taking things that weren't his and mysteriously forgetting that the objects had fallen into his possession. Of the items he had stolen and were subsequently found in his room included food/snacks, notebooks, vaps, and earbuds, albeit cheap ones. We'd all complained to our RA, but since they were such small items, we were told that we should just have a house meeting and talk about it with David to have the problem fixed. We had 2 of those, where he claimed it all looks so similar. How am I supposed to know which is mine? Considering that we all kept our shit in our rooms, this was obviously BS, but the RA, residence assistant, said unless it was something major, campus police wouldn't launch an official investigation. So we instituted a masking tape policy and marked everything, but lo and behold, he still continued his petty theft. Knowing nothing would happen unless I took action, I planned my revenge. I shelled out around $80 for something similar to this bad boy. It was a USB device that once plugged into an unsecured USB port, fried the computer by building a charge and dispersing it into the port, pretty much destroying the CPU among other parts. Now obviously I wasn't going to plant this anywhere, but I had to make it seem like this was a tool and not some sort of setup. So I'd roped Dog and Al in on my plan and installed this software called Device Lock, which protects USB ports from being used without express permission from the user on all of our devices, also just in case the asshole tried to plug it into our laptops. I even went as far as taping my name to this silicon time bomb. With them roped in, the last thing to do was wait and see if David had learned his lesson. It took all of 3 days, but expectedly David did not learn his lesson. I was at the library when this happened, but David had decided that this sexy USB would be the perfect addition to his collection of stolen wares, so he went into my room and took it. Big mistake. I got a Snapchat from Dog that David was going postal and I needed to get back ASAP. I hightailed it, and when I got near our residence, I could physically hear David swearing and yelling from the hallway. When I got inside, he was cussing/screaming that he was gonna sue me for purposely trying to damage his laptop by booby-trapping a USB. Admittedly, I should have held my composure better, but I laughed in that mofo's face. I told him that the USB was clearly labeled with my name on my desk in my room and I was using it to test whether my computer ports were secured from devices such as this. Screaming ensued from him, after which our RA showed up, heard that shit fest from down the hall, and asked what the hell was happening. I stayed quiet to let David attempt to lie his way out of this, but holy fuck, the dumb shit kept to his story. After explaining my side, the RA said we are both going to campus police as this was pretty serious. Cue me thinking I just fucked up my whole future for a stupid act of revenge. When we got there and explained our stories, campus police had none of David's shit. They told him that 1. He cannot sue me since this was not a trap, but a security tool that was within my own living space, of which he had no right entering to steal from, and 2. He was being relocated to the shitty single residences on the other side of campus, and if they caught wind of this again he was getting banned for life from residential as well as receiving a non-academic offense. A nice little chat with the dean about his misconduct. His tone immediately flipped to crying and saying he had all his exam notes on there. It was stress that was causing him to do this, and he had paid to live in the nicer dormitory-style housing, but they basically told him tough shit, this is your one and final warning. The 3 of us enjoyed the rest of the semester with an extra bedroom for storage space, and beer pong, which was definitely a win. As for David, I've only ever seen him in the cafeteria/library on occasion, sitting there studying, without his laptop.